I'm going to start with some bad news. The bad news is that this symposium is not about giving you information or answers. Sorry. The focus of the symposium is going to be helping everyone come up with their own questions, their own answers, their own insights and visions. This will be intense. It's going to be about naming and questioning all your assumptions, actions, past way of doing things, and then imagining the unimaginable. It should be a wild, fun ride. It will be hard. We all need to risk being vulnerable and honest. We will need to take the risk of trusting one another. And we are all in this together, and the hard work is worth it. A word about the style of the presentations. The presentations are meant to be evocative. They're designed to challenge your thinking and assumptions. In order to do that, there will be a pattern of stopping in the middle of the presentations to give you a few minutes of silent reflection time, and then there will be a few minutes for processing and discussion at tables. We'll have regular breaks, so if possible, please wait for the breaks. That makes the discussion time more fruitful. It will be clear as we go along. Throughout these days, I'm going to be using a variety of stories to help us understand where we are at this moment in Benedictine history, and to explore where we're going and what our changing reality means. As Christians and Benedictines, we are people of stories. The exodus of the Hebrew people, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, the lives of Benedict and Scholastica, the stories of our own communities. Stories help us find meaning, help us make sense in confusing times. We use stories of faith to enflesh the meaning of our faith. As we use stories, it becomes critical to situate ourselves within our stories. Different stories reflect our lives at different times, in different experiences. We can reflect on and use stories as a mirror to help us enter more deeply into, to gain meaning for our lives. With that thought, I want you to spend a few minutes with this question. Today, where are you and your Oblate community in the story of the Paschal Mystery, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus? Are you at the Nativity? Everything is full of hope and wonder. Are you in the active ministry of Jesus, the excitement of teaching miracles? Are you at the cross? Are you at the empty tomb wondering what happened? Are you experiencing the ascension, the leave-taking of Christ from our midst? What reflects your reality? There is not a right answer or a right way to do this. Let it take you wherever it will take you. And just spend 5 minutes of silence and then group discussion. So we'll begin our time together with the story of Mary Magdalene at the tomb as one image, one way of understanding our current reality. You all remember the story from John's Gospel. Jesus is dead, tortured to death by the Romans on a cross, in a horrible, humiliating death. He was laid in the tomb. Mary Magdalene, Jesus' friend, his patron, his follower, has gone to the tomb to mourn him, and now even his body is gone. She is heartbroken, bereft, devastated. She can't even mourn him properly. At this point, we need to allow the stories of Scripture to inform, to shape, to transform our own stories. Analyzing the story of Mary Magdalene at the tomb is good if you're going to do an academic paper. That's not what this is about. We need to ask, where do we see ourselves as Benedictines today in Mary Magdalene's story? How is the Benedictine story of the present moment mirrored in the story of Mary Magdalene? Mary Magdalene's story at this moment is one of loss, grief, incomprehension. Jesus was supposed to change the world. He was a prophet, a healer, a king. The reality that Mary Magdalene had hoped for, had sacrificed for, is gone, literally buried. And now all she is left with is an empty tomb, and she can't even anoint his dead body. I think Mary Magdalene had to enter into, acknowledge, experience the full horror and devastation of this moment before she could move on. There's the old joke, denial's not just a river in Egypt. If she had said, "Oh yes, Jesus died and now even the body is gone, but you know, stuff happens, you move on, I'm okay, really. Move along, nothing to see here." But it doesn't work that way, does it? The loss, the devastation, all the depth of the horrible reality has to be acknowledged and dealt with before we can experience a new reality. We have to enter into the darkness, the loss, the night, before we can see the light and the new reality. That's what Mary Magdalene had to do before she could experience the resurrection. That's what we have to do here, today. What tomb are we standing in front of today in the Benedictine world, in our communities? What is the loss, the devastation that you are experiencing? If you were totally satisfied with your current reality in your community, you wouldn't be here. I think we made it pretty clear that this symposium was more than just a nice social gathering. Benedictines are undergoing a tremendous time of change and transition. We have to acknowledge the pain of the current reality before we can move on to a new reality. So, what are you mourning? When you look at your life as a Benedictine, whether oblate or vowed, what did you hope for that you've had to let go of? What have you lost? Dreams, expectations, ideals, people? What is your anger, frustration? Being a Benedictine means constantly dealing with other people, so don't say there's nothing frustrating. What isn't working? What needs to change that isn't changing? It's time to be real. It's time to be honest. What's your fear? What's the deep down horror that you want to lock the closet against and keep inside? It may or may not be a realistic fear, but you have to name it. We're all in this together. We're all experiencing the same thing, so this is a place where it's safe to be honest. This is not an easy set of questions, but we have to do it to allow something new to happen. We will move to hope, but first we have to face the tomb. And again, spend 10 minutes in silence with these questions. What are you mourning? What have you lost? What is your anger or frustration? What is your fear? And then, after you've spent time in silence, we'll spend time discussing at tables. So we've said that this isn't an easy time in Benedictine history. We're at a point of change, transition. Some kind of fundamental shift is happening here and now. And we're like Mary Magdalene at the tomb, grieving for what we've lost. Especially for those of us who are vowed Benedictines, What we signed up for isn't the life we have now. For Oblates, you may not have seen as much change, but you're here because you know things are in transition. And because we're human beings, we are like Mary Magdalene when she recognizes Jesus. She wants to cling to him. She wants to go back to how things were. She wants her Jesus back, the one who is going to change everything, the one she sacrificed everything for, not the one who died a shameful death on the cross. She wants to go back in time. She wants everything to be okay again. Well, we all know how well going back in time works. Whatever the good old days were, even if they existed, they are gone and they're not coming back. Jesus says, "Don't cling to me." Mary Magdalene can't go back. We can't go back. We have to move through death to get to the new life. Don't cling to me. Sometimes I want to say to our sisters, you know it's never going to be 1960 again with lots of young women entering, lots of schools and hospitals, and plenty of clear answers. I'm sorry. We can't go back. Don't cling to me. Now, I don't know what going back means for you who are Oblates. Perhaps you can't cling to monastics on pedestals, sitting at their feet, or signing up to just be a friend of the monastery. Don't cling to me. Mary Magdalene's story is our story. The Jesus we have known is dead. Our old way of life, our old assumptions, old hopes are dead. They're gone. Don't cling to me. But the resurrection has happened. A completely incomprehensible new reality is staring us in the face, if only we can recognize it. But we will only recognize the resurrected Christ if we don't hang on to Jesus, to the life we have known. Don't cling to me. So again, we will spend time in silence and ask yourself in silence, what are you clinging to? Because we have to know what we're hanging on to before we can move on. And then we'll spend some time in small groups sharing. So let's keep unpacking this story. There's Mary Magdalene hanging on to Jesus for dear life. And we have seen how we too are hanging on to our Jesus, to our past, our hopes, all the things that we have seen die, but we can't let go of. In the story, Mary Magdalene thinks she has seen the gardener. She wants to know where he took Jesus' body. Now, personally, this is the place in the story where I want to take Mary Magdalene and just shake her. Mary, look, it's not the gardener, for heaven's sakes. Don't you see it's Christ? He's resurrected just like he said. Open your eyes, girl. Wake up, smell the coffee, see the resurrection. Of course, I want to shake her because I know how the story ends. There's no surprise for me. But Mary Magdalene didn't have any language, any concept, any worldview that would make the resurrection instantly obvious. She had to get her head wrapped around something incomprehensible, impossible. She's totally disoriented. Jesus died. How could he be here, but she can't cling to him? So the story of Mary Magdalene means, are you willing to have your world shaken to the core? Can you give up everything you thought was clear and obvious and settled? Once again, Mary Magdalene's story is our story. The world is shifting. We have to be open to what we thought was impossible. Jesus is now alive, but in a completely new way, not in the flesh, not as he used to be, not like it was in the past, but as the resurrected Son of God, whatever that meant. So, once again, when you looked at the future of Benedictine life, of what it means to be an oblate or a vowed religious, what the relationship between vowed and oblate Benedictines means, what completely new, incomprehensible, impossible reality are you being asked to consider? What does resurrection look like here, today, in your communities? And let's be clear, this is not what is practical, what is possible, what makes sense. This is what is completely mind-blowing, impossible, and unthinkable for the future of vowed and oblate Benedictines. We're not looking for plans, we're looking for resurrection. We're looking at something completely different than the past. Can you begin to name some small glimmer of what a resurrected reality for Benedictines might look like? And remember, resurrection is not going back to how things were. So once again, spend a few minutes in silence, and then we'll spend time sharing. So here's Mary Magdalene. She finally gets it. The other shoe drops. The light bulb comes on, however you want to understand it, and the resurrection clicks. What she does next is not to retire to her apartment and think about it for a few years, which is what I'd do. She runs out and tells everyone, with predictable results. The reality is that those of us who are here at the symposium are called to be Mary Magdalene, to go back to our communities and preach the gospel, the good news that Christ is risen, that there is a completely new, incomprehensible reality of new life in the Benedictine world. During these days together, we will explore what the Benedictine resurrection moment looks like, what it means, and you need to be thinking about that too. What is resurrection reality for us today? I will leave you with a couple of questions to ponder as we close this afternoon. First question is, what is or will be the cost of proclaiming this new reality? The second is, with what reward, at what cost? What will be the ultimate benefit of proclaiming this good news? So just take some time to ponder that as we end.